Everybody, it's Brent Axe here. We're live on the Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page, or perhaps you are watching us a little bit later on YouTube. We do put these live chats, thanks to our friends at Krause Health, up on YouTube as well. But if you're with us live, great to have you here. We're coming off the heels of a Syracuse basketball win over Colgate, 70-54, coming off a pretty lively Jim Boeheim press conference as well. Jim making an announcement about a starting lineup, already changing for Saturday's game. A player that will redshirt, got into the racist graffiti incident that happened at Syracuse University. In the aftermath of that, the protests and what Syracuse is doing to handle that, even pivoted towards impeachment a little bit, and then came back to the racist incident and the handling of it since. Jim discussing, the history of Syracuse and minority athletes. Of course, he was great friends and roommates with Dave Bing, and nobody has seen more than Jim Boeheim when it comes to how the university has evolved on that through the 1960s up till today. So it was interesting to get his perspective on that. And, Syracuse won a basketball game, 70-54, the final over Colgate. So right off the bat, I will say hi to Daryl, hi to Michael Antonio and Joe. And everybody, you guys do your thing in the comments. I'll jump in there and chat with you guys here shortly and react to your comments. So first things first, I was wrong. So I wrote a column on syracuse.com, talked about it locally on radio as well, and I felt Colgate had a pretty – now let's be clear. I did not predict them to win the game. But I felt that Colgate had as good of an opportunity to beat Syracuse as really they've had in a long, long time. NCAA tournament run last year. Returning players could shoot the three. Good presence inside with Ilgauskas, but not tonight. Syracuse started off slow for a good part of the first half. This was a back-and-forth game. There was about 10 lead changes. Colgate had 6 3-pointers in the first half, but the Orange defense really tightened up. Buddy Boeheim leads the way, 17 points, hitting threes, driving inside. Joe Girard III, as we'll get to here, provided a big spark for Syracuse, but Barama Sidibe was huge inside. Yeah, Colgate is certainly not the biggest, strongest, most athletic team, but it's good to see Barama Sidibe moving well, and we'll see what he can do contributing when Syracuse plays some tougher teams inside. But he had, 12 points and 14 rebounds on the night. Elijah Hughes got back on track. Not that he was bad against Virginia, but shot 4 of 14 in that game. But his shot looks to be on track. Jim, while saying at the press conference it won't be normal for him to go deep on his bench, went deep tonight. Robert Braswell got out there. You saw Howard Washington get some run, and Jim going pretty deep on the bench. So, excuse me, all in all, a much-needed win for Syracuse, not only to get a win on the board over a team that you should beat, but coming off a loss to Virginia in the first game of the season where you had to stew for a week. You only scored 34 points, the lowest in the Boeheim era at Syracuse, and the lowest Syracuse had scored in a game, I think, since the late 1940s. You put 70 on the board tonight. Boeheim mentioning that they still have a lot of work to do, and they certainly do that, and that starts with a change. Significant development from Jim, not a surprise, but for Jim to declare it at a press conference 10 minutes after the game's over, that Joe Girard III is going to start a point guard for Syracuse against Seattle on Saturday. He will replace Jalen Carey in the lineup, and that is the right move. Now, Jalen's an athletic player. He is certainly a playmaker, and I like how fearless he is as a player, but he was clearly on a very short leash. And Girard just comes in and sparks the offense. We know he can shoot threes. That guy shoots air balls with confidence. You see the one air ball he tossed up as if he was hitting the game-winning shot in the NBA Finals. But Girard can move. He can distribute the ball. I think his passing is an underrated quality, and there's just a different flow to the offense when he's in there. Carey is just unsure of himself, and we'll see what happens from here. I feel bad for the kid because he kind of fell in Boeheim's doghouse quickly and couldn't get out of it. So, you hate to speculate on these things, but could he be a potential transfer candidate? Syracuse has had players leave the team. Remember Geno Thorpe recently, and players that have, left the team in season. That's not an uncommon thing. So we'll follow that if Jalen Carey sticks it out or thinks about a transfer at this point. That is significant development. Not a surprise to hear this, but officially confirmed by Boeheim as well at his press conference, that John Bullet-Jock, Syracuse's one of the 5 freshmen on the roster, big man, and I would describe a big man project, is going to redshirt this season, so we will not see him on the floor. But all in all, we'll go through a couple of stats here as you guys chat in the comments a little bit. Marek Dolzaj, also a solid game for the Orange. Excuse me, 7 points and 6 rebounds, had a terrific coast-to-coast athletic dunk. We mentioned Elijah, 14 points, 8 assists on the night as well. Should mention that with him. Barama with 12 points and 14 rebounds on the night. Then he kind of had a scattering. Quincy Guerrier played 13 minutes, scored 5 points. We mentioned Gerard, so he ended up with 5 points and 4 assists on the night. He played 19 minutes. He'll play a heck of a lot more than that when he starts on Saturday at the Dome with Seattle visiting, coming a long way to play the Orange in the Carrier Dome. Couple of team stats to throw at you. Syracuse shot the ball very well, 28 of 55. They shot 51%. Colgate, they had 6 threes in the first half, but just got absolutely shut down by the Syracuse defense in the second. 18 of 60. They shot 30% in this game overall. Of their 18 field goals, 13 of those were threes. And it was similar to 2 years ago when Colgate came to the Dome. They hit 14 three-pointers in that game, but lost 72-58. Tonight, they have 13 three-pointers, and they lose 70-54 because they just could not score inside. Clark Griswold couldn't get left. Look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament, and Colgate could not get inside. Syracuse really helped by the rebounding, getting those long misses off the Colgate threes, winning that category 42-31. So enough of me. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comments here. Anthony saying, hey, thanks for your great reporting. Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys coming here. Antonio, a good question. Yeah, do a basketball live stream on Saturday, not football. Yeah, I know some of you guys are kind of giving up on football, but we are going to do the football stream. They're going to bump right into each other. The football game kicks off at, 4 o'clock on Saturday, and then it'll go right into the start of the basketball game. I'll be on football duty on Saturday, so we'll be doing a chat and a recap and all the fun stuff we usually do for that, but certainly we'll be back on basketball duty in Syracuse's next game after the Seattle game. Mary Ellen saying, glad they could put it together in the second half. Joe G is the man. He gets things moving. Michael Antonio says they grew a little tonight. They did. And Boeheim was making that point at the press conference about why he only plays, whatever it is, 7, 8, 9 guys. And you have to develop a consistency with that rotation, a group that knows their trends. And that's the thing that I really lean towards Colgate having a shot in this game, which didn't pan out. But a bunch of seniors and juniors that know how to play with each other, know where they're going to be, move the ball well. They just couldn't hit their shots. I mean, they hit 13 three-pointers, but it was kind of scattered throughout the game and couldn't hit any other shots. Couldn't get in the paint, couldn't score inside. Syracuse is still a team trying to figure each other out. You've already got a change coming with Gerard at point guard, and there's talent there. You have established veterans of Buddy Boeheim and Elijah Hughes, but it's still a team trying to figure out who does what at this point. It looks like Joe is going to bring some stability there. Daryl saying, Brent, good win for the young team. Let's hope the Orange can build off this. Do I feel that Jalen will come out of the starting lineup? The answer to that is yes, as confirmed by Boeheim tonight. Seems like Joe just brings more when he comes on the court. That's absolutely right. And I may have told this story here on Facebook Live. I've certainly told it in other places. I got to tell you, Joe Girard III is a special talent. I mean, you know the numbers. You know his 50 points per game scoring average, the all-time leading scorer in New York State. You guys know about Joe Girard III. But I just remember one time, this last summer, my colleague Mike Waters and I did a story about Joe. I did a video, and Mike wrote a couple of stories about him. And we got a chance to go to this workout that Joe Girard III did with Jimmer Fredette, another Glens Falls legend, has played in the NBA, played internationally, a great pro basketball player. And I'm telling you, if you just walked in this gym and didn't know who was who, you would have trouble deciphering, other than age, because Joe was a high school senior at the time, who's the NBA player and who's the high school senior. I mean, that's how good of a shooter this kid is. He is a special talent. The easy comparison is Jerry McNamara, but that's the best one, too. I think you're seeing the next the next version. Joe's his own player. I'd hate to just call him Jerry 2.0, but there's a lot of Jerry McNamara and Joe Girard III. But I think there's some elements Joe has in his game now that Jerry didn't as a freshman. So it's going to be exciting to see how he develops. Josh noting that Sidibe had a quiet 14 rebounds. Excuse me. Having trouble shaking this darn cough. It's sinus thing. Not that you guys care, but that's why I cough once in a while when I'm talking. But Jamie mentioning it too, that Sidibe had the double-double, third of his career out there. I'd like to see Sidibe do that against some tougher teams with size. Jim mentioned at the press conference as well that it's very limited where you can get Sidibe the ball. It has to be in the lane in a certain place. So he's still developing, but he's healthy, and Syracuse needs a paint presence of some sort. Jesse Edwards is getting enough minutes, getting enough reps, I think, at this point, and we'll see what the plan is going forward with that, just to feel comfortable coming in the game. They love his athleticism. They love his offensive skills, but, I mean, he's just a huge wing in the middle. He's just that typical long player inside for Syracuse, 6'11". He says he's 7 feet. Get the tape measure one way or the other. He's a very tall kid and can really, once he gets comfortable, help Syracuse on the defensive end and the offensive end. He's a skilled player there. Matt saying, any idea when they stop using Sidibe as the high ball screener? He's a zero threat to do anything off the screen. Marek is a much better player in that position, Matt. I agree. They've got to have Barama do it. He's got to know how to do it. He's got to feel comfortable doing it. He's certainly not as physical as Marek doing it, but they want to keep Marek away from the 5 as much as possible. He's going to play that position at times. He's going to do that role, but I think you got to have Barama learn that skill and develop it, though. I would not disagree at all that at this point, Marek is much better at that. Let's see. A good note from our man Ben here on the Syracuse Orange basketball comment. Not only Jalen falling behind Joe Girard, but Bryson Goodine is going to play. He's pushing for minutes, had a nice jumper in this game. He's an electric player in terms of athleticism. It's just all the usual freshman stuff he's got to learn. And your playing time under Jim Boeheim, for the most part, is determined by how you play in practice and how you play defense. So it's between Carey and Goodine now in terms of who's the better defender. That's a great point by Ben, and it's nice when you have depth. And Jeff noted it here, I see in the comments. We even got a Howard Washington Jr. appearance in this game. That makes me happy because that kid just went through a lot last year, stuck it out. He's far behind in the rotation now. Maybe there's even a guy who could eclipse Jalen Carey in the rotation at this point. But Howard's only going to play in situations like tonight because, as Jim said, he's going to kind of lock it down on his rotation. We saw Robert Braswell play a little bit. There's a guy who I felt should have got minutes in the Virginia game because nobody was scoring. I think that's when you break your 7-8-man philosophy, when you go through the entire roster and no one's scoring. But I think Braswell's kind of on that cut line, too, of guys who are only going to play in certain situations in certain games like this. Antonio says, Joe Girard III will have a bigger following than GMAC. Well, there's going to be a lot of buses coming from Glens Falls, that's for sure. Scranton 2.0 in that case. Antonio says, I wish we had a point guard so that Girard could fully play the 2. Buddy isn't as fast, as good a ball handler, or maybe as good of a shooter. I think Joe can play both. I really do. You're not wrong to say that. Joe's great off the ball, but, I mean, Joe had to do everything for Glens Falls. He can play either position. I think if I had to pick one, ideally you have kind of that consummate college point guard, and Syracuse has had some of those in the past, and you let Joe fully go with the 2. But Buddy is shooting the 3. He's much better driving inside. He's bigger, and, I mean, that's a good problem to have, that you have 2 players that can play that position, especially because Joe can go over to the point and still do what Joe does. So some flexibility there, and it didn't take Boeheim long to recognize that that's a better move for his team at this point. There's my man Rob, who says this was just what Syracuse needed. A lot of work to be done for sure. Decent movement on the defensive end, especially in the second half. Buddy and Dolzaj got it going. Hughes was solid. Girard, a smaller guard, but does not lack confidence. Looking forward to seeing what his career has in store. In your opinion, Brent, does college basketball need to adopt a similar redshirting policy to what college football offers? I would be in favor of that, Rob, and good for college football for getting rid of their ridiculous redshirt policy, where if you played one play, it would burn an entire year of eligibility. You can play up to 4 games now. Yeah, absolutely. I think they should have a similar policy just to see what you got. Now, they made that determination with John Bullock already because he's a project, and he's just somebody who's not ready to play. You can see it in practice, and he'll develop, and we'll see him in the future. But I think there are certain players that got to play. There's certain freshmen that have to play. For example, I mean, Quincy Guerrier went redshirt, but that's a guy who's developing slower than maybe people thought. He's getting used to the transition to the college game, and there's just certain players that are bad in practice but good in games, or good in practice but you got to see how they are in games. And I think a similar redshirting policy would really help that. I think it's a great point, Robin. A very good question. Jamie asking, did Marek put on some weight? I'll tell you what, Jamie, they've been trying to get Marek to gain some weight. But, I mean, that kid, they've had him eating everything in sight, hitting the weight room, doing the whole thing. But I'm not Dr. Axe, but when I've discussed this with some people, they believe it or not, Marek is still growing. So when you're still growing at that age, it's hard to put on weight, and they're constantly working out, and what you take in terms of calories, and how much running you're doing and how much workouts you're doing. He is bigger, certainly, but it's been a tougher go than they thought to do that, because it's just what a problem to have. By the way, eat everything you can, work out, and you just can't get bigger. But I wish I still had that problem at my age. But so they're trying, and he certainly is bigger than he was last year. And he's cut and he's athletic, and boy, that coast-to-coast move that he made in this game tonight. Joe Girard III, I saw a comment, was joking around in the locker room after the game. They say that's why they call him Magic in practice. Magic Marek. We'll see if that one sticks. Claude, happy that Joe Girard III is starting on Saturday. Gregory says, do we need a lot out of Joe G? Yeah, the answer is yes. You need him to shoot well. You need him to run the point. You need him to – he had a couple of bad turnovers tonight, and you just have to let a young player kind of work those kinks out. He's got to come off screens. And what I'm wondering about Gregory is defensively. I mean, Joe is still a pretty small player out there. When you saw him against Virginia the other night, and I understand that's kind of an extreme example because they're one of the bigger, more physical teams in the league, but he got swallowed up. Couldn't get free, couldn't get open shots against Virginia. And just kind of your average ACC teams, he's got to work that much harder because he's a little smaller than these guys. But he makes up for it in will. He makes up for it in hustle. He makes up for it in speed in a lot of different ways. But he's going to have to do a lot, and you can tell there's a trust there from Boeheim. I can't remember Boeheim that quickly this early in the season saying, yep, at a press conference, mind you. Just flat out Joe starting Saturday. I don't think I've seen Boeheim do that. Just make a positional change like that. I'm sure it's happened. I don't have anybody popping in my head right now. This early in the season, usually it's kind of a slow burn, or he'll say it in a media interview of some of some sort down the road, or not right away 10 minutes after a game. That was pretty incredible for Jim to do that. But he's right. I mean, we all saw it. We all knew it. And it's got to be done for sure. Josh saying Colgate didn't have it tonight. Yeah, they didn't, Josh, but I'll tell you what. That's a good team. They've got good shooters. They've got great inside play. They're experienced. They tasted it a little bit last year. Syracuse is going to play Bucknell in a couple of weeks, and that's the team that usually represents the Patriot League in the tournament. They've been like that sneaky 14 seed. You've been tempted to put in your Sweet 16 in your bracket the past couple of years, so it's going to come down really to one of those two teams. The Patriot League, though, is one of those leagues you could just dominate the regular season, but if you don't win that conference tournament, you don't get in. So it's all riding on that, but Colgate's a good team. They didn't have it tonight. Credit to Syracuse for shutting them down, and Colgate just kind of fell in a well. We told you about the disparity there. So they go 13 of 41 from three-point range, 18 of 60 overall. They only made 5 field goals inside the three-point arc. You're not going to win, certainly this game, against Syracuse that way, but the way that they play, they're going to win a lot of games in the Patriot League. They're going to be fun to watch. It'll be worth, if you're locally here in central New York, taking that ride down to Hamilton to watch that team play. Colin asks, will Jimmy B retire when his son graduates? Colin, here's the thing. I think Jimmy B is basically like Weekend at Bernie's, okay? And I only mean this, I'm only half kidding when I say this. They're just going to go to the bench one day, and they're going to tap him on the shoulder like, Jim Boeheim is going to be on that bench forever. I mean, I'm just convinced of that now. I think that's the natural break, but I think he's going to coach as long as he's healthy, as long as he's competitive, as long as he enjoys it. Buddy will be gone in a few years. That's kind of a natural timeline there, but I wouldn't doubt it if it was longer than that, for sure. They've had a lot of plans that have gone awry with Jim Boeheim. So at this point, we're just going to ride it out forever with that guy, right? David saying, finally Carey to the bench. Finally. I mean, he's only started a couple of games and rarely played last year, so I don't know if it's finally at this point, but it was frustrating to see, and I credit Boeheim for making that move this quickly. You got to know when a player doesn't have it. I'm surprised. Jalen is a fearless player. He's certainly athletic, but he's just one of these guys that just lets the game get ahead of him. And Joe is just one of those guys that you could tell is in command at all times. He's confident. He sees plays develop. He's not afraid to take shots when needed. He just plays. I mean, Joe is just a fluid player, and Jalen's just not there yet. And if there's just somebody out there that commands the room and has the confidence and can run the offense, that's who's got to be out there at this point. So we'll see if Jalen's got a role going forward at all. I like that comment from Jamie. Paul saying, folks don't appreciate what Buddy means defensively at the top of the zone, alters a lot of passes and gets his hands on a lot of basketballs. He does, Paul, and that's what's going to be interesting, though, because think of some of those big combinations you've had at the top of the zone in recent years. And Michael Benajay, Trevor Cooney at the top of the zone, and those long guards that you put up there. Buddy fits that qualification. Joe's only 6'1". And, again, what he lacks in size and in wingspan, he makes up for in speed. But that's going to be interesting to see that dynamic now that it's those two at the top of the zone. You can mix in some other guards. Bryson gets in there a little bit. We mentioned Howard Washington Jr., experienced player, ready to step in when needed. But Buddy, technically, lengthwise, great defender. Joe is just pure hustle and knows where to be. And that zone is something that's going to take time to develop. And Jim said it at the press conference, and I completely agree with him. This is what I wrote in my season preview a couple weeks ago, that this is going to take time. But once they figure it out and once it clicks, I think this is going to be a fun team to watch. And I see Greg ask, do you think Syracuse is going to be a tournament team? I do. I think it's going to be close. I think they're going to win 21, 22 games, similar to what we saw last year. Although there wasn't the drama last year that we saw in previous years, Syracuse got into the tournament pretty comfortably last year. I do think they're a tournament team. I think they're going to be more closer to, we'll be on bubble watch a lot because there's just some tough ACC games for Syracuse. Their schedule down the stretch is brutal. A lot of tough teams on the back end of the ACC slate. Duke on February 1st, North Carolina on the 29th. They do get Virginia early for the second time on January 11th, so that will help. But you got Louisville on the back end. I mean, there's some tough games for Syracuse. So they got to pile up the ACC wins and the non-conference games that really help the resume. This is a good, challenging non-conference schedule for Syracuse. I honestly have no idea how good or bad Seattle is. It's not a team I've studied up on that much, so I would imagine that could be a win that Syracuse will grab. But there's a few teams on that non-conference slate that I think are going to challenge Syracuse a little bit more than you would think. Let's see. David's saying that we need to drive and kick out more instead of creating their own shots. I'm in favor of that. It seems like there's a lot of ISO in the offense. Now that Joe is running the point, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think you're going to see him drive and kick. I think you're going to see him take the shot when it's there. I think you're going to just see a lot more movement in the offense that just wasn't there with Jalen Carey, unfortunately, because he's just – the confidence isn't there, just hesitating at this point. And we'll close on this comment from Colin. I miss the big guys we used to have on the paint. We got to get some Wheaties to our big men. Anawaku, and et cetera. Yeah, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this the other day. It's just different when you had an Eton Thomas, and Anawaku, even Fab Melo, just that presence in the middle who you could count on, that you could run the offense through. They can't do that with Marek, and they can't do that with Barama. So that's why you see a lot of the ISO play and some of the things that we were mentioning earlier. So it's going to be interesting to see how that position develops. That's still a weakness on this team. There's either inexperience there. We're still trying to see how Barama is. He appears healthy, but he just hasn't had the reps that a player of his position needs because he's been in and out of the lineup. And even when he's playing, he's been limited in the past by his tendonitis. I love Marek's tenacity, and I think his game is developing, but they don't want him at the true 5 position. And Jesse Edwards is a young player and a project there. So, and Quincy Guerrier, we have to mention, certainly there too. A lot of potential there. Just haven't seen much of it through 2 games. So what do you say we end it there for tonight? Again, programming note, no basketball chat Saturday. There will be a football chat. Hopefully that'll be worth it because the football team has just been pretty depressing lately. But we will be following the football team, and I will be doing a live chat on Facebook, which we'll put up on YouTube as well. So I'm not sure when our next basketball chat will be. We'll let you know on social media and all that. But we'll be appearing through Not every non-conference game, but a lot of non-conference games. Certainly every ACC game will be here. But our next live chat will be for football after the Orange takes on Duke on Saturday. Please check out my recap on syracuse.com. All our great coverage from Mike Waters and Donna DeTota and ace photographers Dennis Nett and Scott Schild, and all of our great coverage, which you'll see starting tonight and throughout the day on Thursday as well. The Orange will take on Seattle next at the Dome Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health. Lee, thank you for hanging out with us here live or watching later on YouTube. So we'll talk to you next Syracuse Duke football-wise on Saturday. Until then, you guys enjoy the rest of your week.